Hello, and welcome back to a Year of Miracles with Inner Bloom. We are on lesson 196. The idea for today is it can be but myself I crucify. Sammy and I always laugh about the language because it's way more complicated than it needs to be. All it's saying is that um, you it can appear that you can harm and hurt others, and this is not to negate that actions have consequences, but ultimately you're only harming yourself, right? It can be but myself I crucify. You want to go out and hurt others, get vengeance on others, etc., 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 but it can only be you in the end that you hurt. It can only be you in the end that you crucify. It can only be you in the end that you attack. Even mentally, even in thought, judgment, resentment, blame. You think that you are hurting others, but you're only hurting yourself. Sammy and I actually talked about this in the last lesson, right? With the idea of like the holding onto the hot coal. You hold on to a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else, but you're only hurting yourself, or drinking of the poison, or the analogy of holding a sword over your own head. It can be, but myself I crucify. In addition, the when we I'm going to bring in karma a little bit here, the idea of karma. The reason that karma is the way that it is because ultimately you are in that moment harming yourself. When you inflict harm onto another, you are inflicting harm onto yourself in that moment. And we can see that reflected in our reality. So it's not like this bank where it's like, I did good things and I'm putting coins into the good thing bank and I'm doing bad things. Now I have debt into the bad things bank and it's going to come back to me. It's that you are, because all is one, there is no separation. You are literally in that moment of harming, in that moment of attacking, in that moment of judging, in that moment of resenting, in that moment of blaming, etc., inflicting that upon yourself. And that's why there seems to be a cause and effect, although it's not really that. It's that there is no separation, right? So every time you attack someone through judgment, resentment, or blame, you are attacking yourself. There are no others. As I said, there is no separation. You can only hurt yourself when you hold grievances. We talked about grievances, you can only be hurting yourself. And the solution to this is forgiveness. I said from the beginning of A Course in Miracles that forgiveness is going to be the biggest theme. If you get nothing else from this course, well, two things. If you get nothing else from this course, know your true nature, but also the path to that is forgiveness. Releasing the past, releasing grievances, releasing judgments, releasing the stories, releasing the fears, and coming back to the truth. Forgiveness, including self-forgiveness. All forgiveness is self-forgiveness ultimately, right? All forgiveness is self-forgiveness. But that's how you release yourself from self-crucifixion. And that's how you return to peace, is forgiveness. Before I move on to my other notes, another thing came up here because we're using the word crucifixion and crucify. And when you think of crucify, you think of the story of Jesus Christ in the Bible. And then, of course, in Course in Miracles, they talk about that a little bit in this lesson. Um, eh, the story of the crucifixion has a few points, has a few lessons, has a few meanings behind it. But the one I want to touch on here is the reminder that the crucifixion is a symbol that we are not the body, and we get to release fear. We get to release this idea that even if the body is harmed, even if the mind is harmed, even if the emotions seemingly are harmed, nothing in you changes. You still remain whole. You still remain perfect. You still remain as your isness. There is no true death. The body can die, the body can be crucified, but the truth is you are not the body, you are not the mind, you are not your emotions. And this lesson does emphasize that. So I wanted to make sure to bring that up because there's a reason why the word crucifixion is used here, right? Because whether it's a form of mental harm, whether it's a form of emotional harm, holding anger towards someone, whether it's a form of actual harm. The truth is we only end up harming ourselves, but ultimately, truth is we are not a body, we are not our emotions, we are not a mind, and nothing actually can be harmed. Nothing actually can be crucified, right? So we get to forgive, we get to release, we get to undo this illusion of pain and suffering. We get to undo this guilt, right? Because we have guilt for the things that we believe that we've done to harm others. Uh, we can obviously show compassion and make amends, but ultimately we get to forgive ourselves. That's the path to peace, both for ourselves and for others. Let's see what else I have in my notes here. The mind that attacks must first believe it can be hurt and then hurt others. We've touched on this, right? So if you attack, if you we talked about defensiveness, right? So if you attack, it's because you are believing that you need to defend something. And if you believe that you need to defend something, it's because you believe you can be hurt. So the only reason that we hurt others is because we believe that we can be hurt. And the only reason we believe that we can be hurt is because we bought into the illusion of the identification with the body, the mind, the emotions, which is the belief in being separate, the belief in a separate individual person. And this is reminding you of your true nature, of your wholeness, of your perfection, of your untouchableness, I guess you could say, because if you know that this is just the avatar, if you know that these are just waves rising on the ocean, um, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing can actually happen to who you are at your true nature. Nothing can actually tarnish you, damage you, harm you, etc. at your true nature. Um, all attack is a defense against the truth and a form of self-condemnation. I don't remember why I wrote that there. But let's move into how to practice this. So for today, I just want you to I want you to practice forgiveness. I want you to really release two things. I want you to notice when you are judging, blaming, holding grievances, and practice forgiveness. We've done this already. We're deepening it. We're doing it again. But also on another level, I really want you to notice where you're holding guilt and shame because you've believed that you have harmed others and have attacked others. I want you to release that because, again, ultimately, you're holding on to that hot coal, whether it's through anger, wanting to throw that anger or that resentment or that judgment or others, but also through guilt. When you're holding on to when you maybe that's not the best analogy, but when you are sitting there feeling guilty and believing, oh, I hurt all these people, or I did that, or I did this, it's like the initial realization that maybe you should have acted differently or whatever, that's it. The initial making amends, the initial apology, that's it. Holding on to that guilt and shame doesn't do anything. You're just crucifying yourself. You're not making the other person better. You're not changing anything. You're just hurting yourself. Let it go. Release it. Your past is done. It's over. You get to return to peace. You get to return to love. You deserve it. You are worthy of it. You don't have to earn it, right? You get to forgive yourself. So I really want you to not only practice forgiveness to others and release judgment, resentment, blame, and grievances, because when we try to crucify others, when we try to harm others, even through our thoughts, even through our feelings, even through holding on to angers, we're harming ourselves, but also holding on to guilt. You don't need to be a martyr. You don't need to keep punishing yourself for what you believe you've done to others, because in that moment, you've already harmed yourself. You've already crucified yourself. You don't need to continue to nail yourself to the cross, because we're using that analogy. You don't need to continue to crucify yourself again and again and again and again. It was already done in that moment. So you get to forgive yourself, you get to let it go, and you get to be in peace. You get to be in peace. Let go of the past. Let go of all of that. This is your true ticket to freedom. So that's all from me for this lesson. Sammy?
I love that you said you are literally putting yourself on the cross. And like that, I truly believe that that is a collective frequency that we all tune into. It's the suffering that you have to earn your worth. Like we're born into that. We are. Like every single one of us is born into that collective energy. And this is why we do this work to remember that we don't have to suffer. It's a narrative, it's a story. You might as well literally go and pin yourself to the cross, literally, right? The thing is, though, that story is to tell us that Jesus knew that the pain and suffering that he was going through wasn't who he really was, right? That's the difference. He knew that it was an illusion, like, right? It wasn't real. Like, his avatar wasn't real. The pain wasn't real. He was the observer of the story of a guy being pinned to the cross, pinned, nailed, pin the tail on the donkey. Right? That's the difference. So we look at these archetypal figures and we're like, whoa, great and powerful God and all this lot. But we only see the pieces that, again, through our lens, through our perspective, that our inner world allows us to see, right? Not no one, that's a complete lie, but very few are connecting to that Jesus was the archetype of a high level of consciousness, love, spirit, right? The essence of the divine, God. He wasn't a human being, right? He played the role as a human being, but he understood that he wasn't a human being. And that's what a lot of people can't grasp, which is why I believe A Course in Miracles has been created using Jesus as the archetype to help us understand more about the story, the journey. And so I loved that Karina used that because we should use that one instead of the hot coals because it's far more brutal. And sometimes you need that brutalness or awareness where you're like, shit, I've been doing it to myself. Literally, as you were saying that, I was thinking about something that happened over the weekend. But the funny thing is I caught myself in the moment that I knew this was just a story, but I allowed it to play out because I was enjoying it from a different level of perspective. I no longer was the victim. I was the one that was playing the role of this person that was creating a victim like perspective, right? Rather than the one suffering in pain. I was just like allowing myself to enjoy the experience. And I've never been that I want to say, oh, I just saw a go past on a car. I've never allowed myself I know this sounds a bit fucked up, but to enjoy life's struggle in that way before. Because we're human beings, right? And we have the gift of feeling. And so, if you could allow yourself to experience life in its fullness, to be able to feel all of the depth of everything it's trying to get you to feel without immersing yourself into it and believing you are it, life would be a beautiful journey, right? But we don't allow ourselves to do that. And so, what happens instead is the pain, the struggle, and the suffering becomes part of our identity, and that's the problem. Whereas it's not our identity, it's an experience. And if you understood that it was just an experience that's meant to flow through you, right? Comes and goes, like, the clouds, the storm, you would fully immerse yourself into it. Like Karina said before, the dancer in the dance. You're just dancing with life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? But yet we dance, immerse into fun, joy, the feelings that feel good, but we tiptoe into fear, anger, sadness, grief. Whereas, like, I don't know, part of me wants to say is like, yeah, but don't fear any of it. Enjoy the experience of it all. Because I think if you weren't so afraid of your own guilt, your own shame, your own suffering, it wouldn't have any power over you anymore. Right? but we give it so much power. And like I said, it then becomes us. I know I've gone off on a tangent, but this was just coming through, and I trust, as always, it comes through as it's meant to. But again, just reiterating that all attack is self-attack, you know? Every time you judge, resent, lash out at someone, that's you literally crucifying yourself. However, I do believe, again, I do believe there's a nuance to this, because if you did it from the perspective of knowing that, you know, you weren't doing it harmfully, you were just playing the experience of it would be a different experience. Does that make sense? I'm basically trying to say, because when we judge someone, right, or when we're like lashing out at someone, or when we're having a go at someone, we're literally immersed into that experience and we believe we're the character. And there's a lot of hate, right? Whereas here's the thing, you can judge someone and you can shout at someone without hate. I know that sounds bizarre, but you can allow yourself to experience the program doing its thing without being fully fueled by anger, by hate, by rage behind it. That's the difference. And I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me, because the thing is, I don't want you to start judging yourself when you judge people or when you shout out and lash at people. You get to say that's just part of the experience, right? Because what happens is, well, sometimes when people go on this journey and they start then noticing that they fall back into default, that's not a bad thing. We don't have to shame ourselves for that. It's just the experience. Oh, I just back into that role that Sammy used to play. Never mind, on with the day, right? That's what it gets to be like. We don't then have to nail ourselves to the cross because we shouted at someone. And it's basically what I'm trying to say. It was just an experience. But so many people cling on to these experiences, like Karina said, the hot coals. And so it's just understanding when we hold on to them, it's like we spoke about before, like drinking poison. And so the ego will try to make you feel bad for it because it doesn't want you to know your true power. It doesn't want you to feel free, free of burdens, free of the hate, free of the guilt, free of the shame. Because remember, that's linked to your ego, because that's linked to your identity. Who are you without that? Divine. And so, of course, your ego is going to keep pulling you back to these narratives. But you have the choice, right? Freedom is a choice. And it's those choices that you continue to make to connect back to the essence of who you really are, which then over time allows you to just be the embodiment of that, right? Like we see Jesus, he was the embodiment of that. And so we don't need to fear any of it, but we do have to keep consciously making the right choices. And when I say the right choices, there are no right choices, but there are better choices that we can make for ourselves. Like I choose to make a choice where I connect to the essence of who I really am, rather than my programming, right? That's why we're on this journey to unlearn and unbecome everything that we've been told to be and led to believe it's who we are, to remember the essence of who we really are. That's the choice that we constantly need to keep making. And you can do that in every single moment. It says here, you are both the problem and the solution. I love that so much. It says your mind is the source of the crucifixion. Why can't I say that? Crucifixion, but it's also the source of resurrection, right? The same place that creates fear holds the key to freedom. That's powerful. That's why I said you shouldn't fear your fear. Because like we've always said, the shadows, when you wake up in the middle of the night and you see this big scary monster on the wall and you're like, oh my God, rather than putting your head under the duvet, like, I don't want to see it, I don't want to see it. You stare at it, you look at it and you're like, hang on a minute. Like I said, you look down and it's just this toy on the floor reflecting onto the wall, and it's not as scary as you thought. It's the same with our fears. It's the same with the narratives the ego has created of the things outside of us, right? So that's it for me. I've gone on a little bit of a tangent, but I enjoyed it. But I have nothing else to say on the matter.
Lovely. Yeah, and I love that you encouraged people not to beat themselves up or be afraid of their feelings, or yeah, go and be like, and judge themselves for judging others or whatever occurred. Um, yeah, let it go and move forward. And again, forgiveness. This is all about forgiveness, right? It's all about forgiveness. And it's really important because we compound it. We compound it when we then beat ourselves up for feeling bad, beat ourselves up for judging, beat ourselves up for lashing out, beat ourselves up. We're just compounding the situation. The immediate solution is not a big thing. Oh my God, I can't believe I behaved that way. This is actually reflects this lesson perfectly because we're talking about like, don't hold on to guilt. Don't hold on to, it's not to feel guilty. It's not to beat yourself up. It's literally forgiveness. Forgive yourself, move forward. Forgive, move forward. Forgive, move forward. Let it go, move forward, right? And we can even celebrate the fact that we've become so aware that we can catch it, right? Because I know in my past, it's like you behave a certain way and you don't even realize that you've done that. It's just like normal. But if you're going like, I was being judgy there, instead of beating yourself up, you can even celebrate that you gained that level of awareness that you caught that, right? And then it gets more subtle and more subtle. Yeah, and Sammy also brought up another point, which I think is really important when we're talking about our true nature and like the nature of reality, is that we can remove this idea of good and bad, right? We can, everything's just a game, everything is just a movie. It's like you go into different, when you're going into the movies, you can see different films. You can see a horror film, you can see a comedy film, you can see a romance film, you can see a film where the main character overcomes something really wonderful and like gains a lot of success and money. You can see a film where the main character falls into ruin and the movie just ends like that. Boom, credits. My point of bringing that up is that this is just a movie too. Like some people, there are certain narratives where people judge movies, but ultimately it's just a movie, right? There's no good movies or bad movies. Some make us feel better than others. Some leave us feeling shaken up, and some leave us feeling really warm in our hearts. Um, so it's just like a movie. We can choose which stories we engage with. We can choose which games we play. We can consent to playing different games. But ultimately, what you're seeking is to, ultimately, what you're seeking is not suffering, is not horror, is not those dense feelings, because those in the moment are self crucifixion crucifixion because I wanted to say crucifixion, it's not a word. um those in the moment are that very suffering that we're looking to heal and to dissolve. Ultimately what everyone is seeking is joy, love, and happiness. So you can choose to play whatever game you want, um but know that 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 when you buy into the games, when you consent to the games, in one way or another, they're going to contribute to a level of suffering. And it's when you choose to realize your true nature, when you choose to come back home to the truth, that you actually find all the things that you've actually been seeking this whole time. Do you have any responses to any of that? Or okay. Thank you so much, and we'll see you for tomorrow's lesson.